Okay. A little late than usual. Um, but I wanted to gather my thoughts onto this film that I'm honestly still trying to wrap my head around. I watched it last night and it's been a little less than 24 hours for me to gather my thoughts about it. Um, because this film was a real head scratcher, y'all. I gotta admit, this was a real head scratcher. This made me need to process and think and understand what the movie is trying to convey and its themes and all that, along with its characters. A lot of great things, a lot of bad things. So we're gonna get into it. So welcome to Adamus Chase podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. I love you. I do. I do. And I hope you all are doing good. I hope you all are doing well. Staying safe out there, staying warm in this neat little winter season that we got going on. So, Megalopolis, um, newest film by legendary filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola. He is famous for making Apocalypse Now, Bram Stoker's Dracula, um, uh, uh, so many Godfather, Godfather 2, Godfather 3, just so many crazy great films. Pegasus got married. He also directed the Captain EO short with Michael Jackson, co-written by George Lucas, Rumblefish, Outsiders, and yeah, countless other films. The Conversation. So this is a guy who is legendary in the 70s with, so many great films, literally back to, like, it's 5 films back to back that he has made, from The Godfather to The Conversation to Godfather Part 2, and then a miniseries of The Godfather, Apocalypse Now. And he has made his mark as a legendary filmmaker in his own right, um, with the boom of the 70s for filmmakers who just basically shook the industry in its core, right? You have big filmmakers around this time like Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, William Friedkin, um, George Lucas. I don't know if I mentioned George Lucas, but yeah, you have legendary filmmakers that Coppola was a part of, and recently he has made a film that was apparently 40 years in the making, and it has gone through trials and tribulations of different cast members who are kind of coming in and out, and script changes and all sorts of stuff. So you would imagine that, like, something that takes over 40 years to make or produce, you would imagine that, oh, this is going to be his I guess magnum opus, which feels big in of itself. And we're gonna do the non-spoiler stuff for a second here. So the non-spoiler of it is a an architect, I guess an architect named Caesar, who has invented a building material called megalon that is, I guess otherworldly. It got him to win a Nobel Peace Prize, and this architect want to apply that same material, building material of megalon, to a whole society, a whole city called Megalopolis. And this was loosely, I think, based off of a book called 12 Against Gods, I think it's called. And yeah, I think getting into the film, I was hesitant, and I wasn't necessarily like needing to go and watch this film, and I watched it at home. I just didn't want to. I just didn't have time to see it in the theaters. I know there was like a whole theater experience with it, especially if like you watch it on IMAX or something. Like there's certain screenings where there would be like some audience interaction, not in the way that like any audience member can interact with the film, but like, there are moments of the film where it definitely shows that, like, you can tell there might be a little bit of an interactive thing with it. But I think overall with this film, without getting into spoiler territory, I think I understand where the narrative and the direction that Francis Ford Coppola was trying to get into or get through, and I think he achieved that well. How well? It's kind of left up to you, I guess. For those who still want to watch the film, because we are going to get into spoiler territory of it all. But I think it's a film that is worth checking out. I think that the story in of itself is interesting, and it has an A-list cast of people who are in this film. Adam Driver playing as Caesar, legendary actor Giancarlo Esposito as Franklin Cicero, who is the mayor of this city, this fictionalized city called New Rome, which is essentially New York City, but like futuristic kind of futurism, utopian aspect of New York. And you have Natalie Emmanuel, played as his daughter, Cicero's daughter, Julia. And you have Aubrey Plaza as Wow Platinum, who's just essentially like a, goofy is not the right word, but strange in a twisted way, is what Aubrey Plaza plays, and you can tell like there might be some improvisational acting, which is exactly what Aubrey Plaza is fantastic at. She's a hilarious person. And you have Shia LaBeouf, who played as Claudio, who is Caesar's cousin, who is the child or grandchild of Crassus, who is played by Jon Voight, who is just basically like a wealthy dude, like oil baron kind of dude, and legendary, phenomenal actor. You know him as Morpheus, Mr. Lawrence fucking Fishburne, as Fundy Romaine, who is Caesar's driver, and he plays as a narrator in this film. And along with like a cavalcade of other actors, you have Dustin Hoffman, you have Jason Schwartzman, and Grace Vanderwaal. A lot of no-name talent mixed with like really good, outstanding actors and whatnot. And of course, some who are controversial, like Shia LaBeouf and Jon Voight. Which was intentional, apparently, with Francis Ford Coppola, who has challenged cancel culture, I guess, a few times within his films, and also fought against a couple of controversies with this film, in just typical Francis Ford Coppola fashion, right? So, getting into the spoiler territory of this, it's kind of hard to spoil this film, to be honest with you. Well, I guess not that hard, because the narrative is pretty much straightforward, like I said in the non-spoiler, with some additional context, right? Caesar, and I guess the best way to explain this film, at least for me and my thought process, is to explain it, by way of the characters. Because a plot is definitely there, right, in terms of creating, Megalopolis and this dude's Caesar's journey of trying to develop that, while meeting countless challenges from, his adversaries like Cicero, who wants to protect the status quo of New Rome and essentially keep things the way that they are, no different than our, U.S. government, who just, kind of go by the way of the status quo and keeping things as, regular as they possibly can, despite that there is, public outcry of change and needing change and demanding it. that is unfortunately never followed through with. So getting into this film, we kind of start off with Caesar in his kind of dilemma of trying to create a better society, one of innovation and one of creation, of art and literature and architecture kind of meshing into one another. In a very profound way, I guess. It's a lofty goal, as one might say. Um, and this character also, Caesar, can stop time. Now, how relevant is that in the overall story? Not relevant at all. He's just, I guess, a superhero in a way, I guess. Yeah, that he can just stop time. How or why it's beyond me. But that does not pertain to the overall plot at all. So you have this guy who is constantly challenged, and Cicero, with the power that he has, definitely has had doubts and done everything he possibly can to make sure that Caesar doesn't make Megalopolis, a reality. And so as the story kind of goes along, Caesar is kind of like he's kind of like a romantic in a way. His wife or past girlfriend, past wife, passed away due to unforeseen circumstances. I don't know how, but you can tell that this is a dude who is broken, who just kind of hooks up for just hooking up to just kind of fill that void that he is missing in his life by hooking up with Aubrey Plaza's character, Wow Platinum, is just a TV personality, a TV host, a reporter, I guess, in many ways, who exploits the rich and gets essentially gets her way of doing things. And so she tried to exercise that exploitation with Caesar, and Caesar doesn't play. So, they both stop seeing each other, and then Wow Platinum goes to his uncle, Caesar's uncle, Crassus, played by John Voight, who has given her all that, who has awarded her all that exploitation and power and money and all that. And, definitely, it's an interesting little side story, I guess, that I'm still trying to wrap my head around. And that's the part too that confused me the most, is that these are presumably pretty powerful, substantial characters, like Julia, who is Cicero's daughter, who has a pretty prominent role because she falls in love with Caesar for who he is and what his mind is capable of, and falls even more in love when she discovers Caesar's past and all that. And she didn't really have much power in the story when I thought she would. There's one scene in particular that I felt was so disjointed in a way, and it's kind of in the beginning of the film. It's like you're 30 minutes in, 40 minutes in. There's a scene where Caesar talks to Julia, and Julia, wants to play a part in Megalopolis, wants to play some sort of role in this development. And Caesar challenges her and says, well, I want to entertain thinkers and innovators and talk about literature and art. The guy is kind of like he's kind of like a pompous sort of like the dialogue feels really self-stroking of the ego, of just like, oh, I want to have thoughtful conversations and shit like that. It's like, okay, sure, and completely disregards her as someone who can or is capable of having those conversations. But because she dropped out of school or she just, went into a different direction, he pays no mind to it. And throughout the course of the film, it was almost like as if she was doing her best to win that affection over from him of this brooding artist, right? Which I don't agree with. I mean, I feel like, with a character with that much power should have a little bit more exploration as to who this character is. She's just kind of like, just following him around until Caesar is like, okay, you know what? You're hired. Sure. Let's go ahead and create something. And they inevitably like fall in love and yada, yada, make a child. Despite the fact that Cicero wants no part in that at all, and that he blames her for sleeping with the enemy essentially, when Caesar's just only trying to do the right thing and challenges Cicero, but Cicero doesn't want to be challenged and wants to do things his way, right, of making as much money as he possibly can for him and his friends, the imperialism of it all. Yeah, I just think that, like, even Wow Platinum's character too, I feel like, as diabolical as she is, I feel like could have had a much larger role in all this. But I don't know if there's like going to be a director's cut. I hope there isn't, because it's just another reason to just have like another movie of the same thing, just with more minutes, I guess. But that's neither here nor there. I just think that, there could have been a lot more to be said with those characters. But I digress. Moving on. There were definitely, trials and tribulations of what Caesar has gone through, especially with the demise of his wife. He just sort of is kind of like this guy who's just bouncing from woman to woman, a womanizer, if you will, sure, right? Until there was one situation where this pop star, this artist, who is a Vesta, I think her name is kind of like the pop star of New Rome, and has like a whole plays like a this performance at Wow Platinum and Crassus is a wedding. She plays her role, and the Claudio, who's the cousin, planted a AI generated video, or like a deep fake video of Vesta and Caesar essentially sleeping together and whatnot. And of course, it's a deep fake. It's not true. And once the cat is out of the bag and that footage is shown, in this giant coliseum for this wedding, I guess, showcases what how far power can really get through. People start turning on Vesta and even Caesar, I'm sure, at some point. Oh no, they did. They did. And it just becomes an even bigger issue, because and this is part of the story where it kind of tackles cancel culture. So it's like, Caesar just kind of walked through it, and not really pay any mind to it, despite that, like, he has his own issues of like drug abuse and all sorts of shit, as probably a result of what he went through with the death of his wife. It just can only make you fall deeper and deeper into despair. And Julia's the only one who can pull him out of that, right? And get him to be inspired once again and complete Megalopolis, So she did play a role in that, but like it could have been, in my opinion, much bigger. But what the fuck do I know? Okay? So, as the story progresses, this is at the point where, like, the film was, it just kind of went into so many fucking like directions in a way. Um and yeah, I think the I think it's kind of already been said, because within the third act, like, he does create that megalopolis, what Caesar wanted. um and now with the help of Cicero, by convincing him that, this is society that is only going to be exercised by, compromise and innovation and, union, I guess, right? Which is interesting because it's like, if this is only going to benefit people who are the downtrodden, the plebeians, if you will, you would imagine that, like, there would be a bigger, like, the common folk would play a bigger role in this film, and that's not necessarily the case. It's just all kind of, you know, uh, understood and told vicariously through Caesar, and Caesar was born into this rich family. He is just a guy who's been privileged his entire life. I mean, almost everybody in this movie has been privileged. At least their characters are in a very privileged in a very privileged state. You know, with all of like the political all with the political drama attached to it. So yeah, it's definitely convoluted. The film is, yeah, essentially convoluted, but it's a journey that Francis Ford Coppola had set out for himself to make for over 40 years, and the film has gone through numerous changes. Other actors of this film had talks with Francis Ford Coppola in having a role in that film. Before ultimately it is the cast who is part of it now. This film was definitely fraught with controversy for sure, and one of them being that the more famous ones, right, is the deep fake AI, well, not deep fake, sorry, the AI generated trailer that essentially, like, I guess Lionsgate put out, because Lionsgate did get the distribution rights to Megalopolis. But I'm sure Francis Ford Coppola was part of that process in some way, shape, or form, because the trailer, this AI trailer, showcases all of Coppola's filmography, all of his famous films, heavily well-regarded Oscar-winning films that were, criticized by critics alike. The only problem is that most of those quotes that were in that trailer are all made up. They're all just essentially made up, and they eventually took the trailer down, and I think made a new trailer, but you can't, once you can't put the toothpaste back into the tube, and people had a lot to say with that trailer. I did watch the trailer. I thought it was just kind of silly. I was like, okay, why would like the controversial reviews get this film to be, like, I understand the idea of it, of like showcasing, like, oh, if you thought those movies were great, well, they were heavily criticized, as much as Megalopolis is probably going to be criticized, like already kind of getting ahead of the curve for much criticism, which I feel like is valid. I mean, the film is very convoluted, and I'm sure if I watch it again, I'd probably understand it and maybe even appreciate it more. And that's the thing. I don't really have a need to watch this film again anytime soon, at least. I'm sure, in 10, 15 years from now, I might come back on the pod and, be like, listen, this film fucking rules. but for the most part, it's definitely a Coppola film, and I don't think that it is the worst fucking movie, but it is 100% not something that is easily understood and universally can be regarded, right? There's definitely messages, there's definitely like subliminal meanings with this film that I just don't understand. But I'm sure a lot of people will, especially with multiple watch throughs. I'm sure people will have their opinions on it. But yeah, I think that overall, do I recommend this film? That's the thing. It's like I don't have many thoughts about it other than that. Yeah, it's just a Francis Ford Coppola film, and with its controversies and the alleged sexual misconduct from Coppola. I mean, it's not all that substantiated, but it is interesting to see like how there are people who have been uncomfortable working or collaborating with Francis Ford Coppola. Although, like, I think that alleged sexual misconduct came from an extra who did sue Coppola, I think, at one point. And Coppola fought against that, which was a public lawsuit. So I guess it is a bigger issue than it actually is. So never mind. I guess he might have probably very well done some kind of scandalous shit that is no chill, especially to strangers. But no buts. It's just it's unexcusable. If he's done that shit, that's not good. It's just that's no good. And on top of that, he has famously done this in prior films, but in this film, in Megalopolis, he had fired his original visual effects team, which is not shocking considering that he has done the same thing with Bram Stoker's Dracula when there was visual effects there, and he has fired people from that film as well. So he's definitely had a history of just firing people for things that he people don't match his vision with, which is, in my opinion, essentially silly. You pick with these people who are going to essentially entertain your vision and maybe even extend your vision past the point of how you would see it, depending on the collaborators, right? And who at whichever department, whether it's art department or G&E or camera, hair and makeup, every part, every aspect of every film, every department is very essential, even as far as the production itself. Like even production assistants, really make the film fucking happen, and I think that's just part of filmmaking. And Francis Ford Coppola has famously said that he doesn't necessarily have a agenda or a sense of direction. Each day on set is just sort of like, is just kind of left the conversation open to the collaborators, which is fine, but it's hard to convey what you really need when you depend on your collaborators to do that for you. Now, do I know that's exactly what happened? No, I wasn't on set, on any of Coppola's films, but it is interesting to see that his approach when it comes to filmmaking and, going day to day, it's a meticulous process, and it takes a lot from directors sometimes because, you're there, you have the vision, you're answering questions, you are working through problems, and then unforeseen circumstances can happen, that can completely throw the entire film off or the entire schedule off, and you just have to work around it. that's just filmmaking 101. And I guess if you are, a filmmaker who has been making films since the 70s, you tend to probably have a little bit more of an ego when you are making a film like this. I'm not saying that an ego is a bad thing, but you can only take that ego so far and make sure that it can be a pleasant experience for the cast, but also for the crew, which the cast have expressed, generosity towards Francis Ford Coppola, and even said that, like, I think Adam Driver has said that this was one of the best shoots that he has done, which I probably wouldn't disagree, because, I mean, the guy is like a fountain of film knowledge, that he is passionate about filmmaking and whatnot. I think it's a very interesting exploration. However, treating your crew with respect is essential when it comes to filmmaking or in any industry for that matter. You just got to respect the people who you work with. It's just plain and simple. And yeah, this is a guy who has been making films for way longer than my life, and he is a master at what he does, despite the fact that I don't love every single film that he has made. I've definitely had some qualms with other films, but for the most part, I mean, it's just Francis Ford Coppola. This is a guy who is sort of like in the same vein of David Lynch, not in the same filmmaker at all, but in terms of like the process of making this will inevitably probably just won't make sense. But there is a rhyme and a reason for it. There is a there is a goal. There is something that you are essentially going to meet at the end of this. But not many filmmakers I guess have that thought process. It's just usually like most directors know the direction that they want to drive the story in. It's all on the page, but the director ultimately is the person to convey that in an articulate way that can openly collaborate, but also have agency to know what you want and what you need to see. And not many filmmakers have done that. I've definitely worked with filmmakers who just have no fucking clue as to what their vision is, and just will tell art department, the department I work in. I've worked with a few directors who will literally say, "What do you think? What do you want to do?" And that's a lot to ask for, especially like you don't know what they are actually looking for, and they just go, yeah, just do what you think is best. And then when you do it, there is a high likelihood that they probably won't like it, or they want to make a lot of changes and adjustments and stuff, and that only slows the set down, right? But you also have filmmakers who are so strict about their vision, and it's very precise and very like mathematical, that it has to hit on so many levels, from production design to how the hair is styled, how the costumes look, to the lights, to even sound mixing and cinematography, and those filmmakers, are interesting. It's just, it's hard to have that balance when you are filming, because making any movie is really fucking hard, and it requires help. It requires a lot of help. So, yeah, it's just, it creates, as long as you work with people who are good at collaborating and are open to that, you probably are going to have a somewhat of a successful film, given that you have the direction and the collaborators in these respective departments also have a vision as well. And, it's kind of like the process of meshing it together, or if one is like clashing, with the other, it's about, making those compromises to fulfill that film, to make that vision come to life, the motion picture, if you will, right? So, I feel like it's an interesting part of filmmaking history to have Francis Ford Coppola make a film that's completely financed himself, with no studio obligations or no overhead, looming, executives trying to put in their 2 cents as to like what the film should be or not be, But I will say, I don't even know how you would market a film like Megalopolis. It's very interesting. And yeah, it's kind of cool being part of this history where you kind of see this film be the way that it is with no studio influence with it, and to have it release. And sure, it's not, widely received well. um, People call it a convoluted mess, and they're sort of right. And then you have, other filmmakers who are like, oh, this is transcendent. This is great. This was Coppola at his magnum opus, and he is delivered. And I think it's an interesting film. I don't know if it's life changing in any way, shape, or form, but I do think that it is fascinating to be part of that history, to live, I guess, in this time of history where such film exists, in its use of blending the old cinema magic that Coppola is always known for, mixed with like sci-fi elements and using AI. And I read somewhere that like there was a few points in the film where like, they would have like these artist renditions of a utopia, but it could have been AI. I don't know how true that is. It was hard for me to even gauge with it. So I don't know if that's a corroborative story, but yeah, to blend all of these, new technology and, blending it with even CGI in the film doesn't feel like it is blatantly CGI. There's a few moments where it feels like, oh, this is CGI as fuck, but for the most part, he blended it very nicely and use it really well, So clearly there is a vision with Francis Ford Coppola, and he has executed that vision. It's just with the story and its characters, I feel like is left for more interpretation and a little more opportunity, especially with its female leads. Female lead, Julia Cicero. That could elevate the story. And I feel like there could have been just a little more of that. And overall, I think, Francis Ford Coppola has made the film that he has set forth to make, and at the end of the day, he is the guy who is satisfied with the work that he's put in, and the turbulent history that it carried with it. He fulfilled that promise, after so many years of, him talking about the film and not getting it made. People were wondering if the film would even exist ever. And eventually it did. So to see that come to life is very fascinating. Maybe inspiring to some people. But overall, it's an interesting little perspective of how this film, of its inception to the final product, and blending all of these, styles together for filmmaking and direction and writing, kind of all coming together and whatnot. And for that, I think it's good. And yeah, I want to know what y'all think. Maybe y'all have different opinions. Maybe y'all feel the same. And I recommend it. I do recommend people watching this film. I'm sure people will have different takeaways, and I think that it would be cool to see like other interpretations. I know a lot of people did not like this film at all. I don't know if I'll go as far as to say that, it's a horrible film, as much as it's just a Francis Ford Coppola film. It's very, very dreamlike. It's very, it's non-linear in its storytelling, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's interesting. That's it. It's interesting. And yeah, it's kind of hard to give a rating for something like this, even if I did think that it was a bad film. It's kind of hard to give a rating such as a film like Megalopolis, even though it definitely has ratings, Rotten Tomatoes certainly does not agree with me, but overall, I think I would implore people to give it a watch. If you are a film fan, you like movies, you like Francis Ford Coppola films, I would give it a watch. I'm sure some people would have different takeaways from it, but I think that's it. I think I've been yapping on for so long. I think it was just an interesting thought experiment with this film. So let me know, y'all. Let me know what you think. I'm glad you stuck around and watched this. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, do all those YouTube shit, I appreciate it. Any interaction is good interaction. So, yeah. That's been about it, ladies and gentlemen. So I'll see you on the flip side. Peace out.